for the people that didn't read the book, what kind of policies did you guys propose in the new book? I believe Earth4All. Yeah, if you could kind of let us in on that.
Yeah, so Earth4All was an interesting process because it came together with the help of 30 economists from across the globe and climate scientists from across the globe, and was a 2 years project. And if you would have asked me 2 years ago if we were able to find an agreement, I wouldn't have been so sure, because also in this scene, kind of people have different opinions on certain things. And what we tried to do in Earth4All with the economists and climate scientists, with the help of a computer model, but also other research, was to look at the minimum amount of transformations necessary to achieve something like well-being for all on a relatively stable planet. And the important thing for us is this combination of ecological and social factors. So the 5 areas we describe and bring up policies for each of these areas is an energy transformation, because we know that fossil fuel industry is actually the most important thing to combat climate change. The second one is food production, because we know that ever expanding landmass leads to massive problems with biodiversity loss. Look at the Amazon rainforest, just going there and cutting down trees has massive effects on Earth. And then these 2 are kind of the environmental ones. And then we have one which is tackling inequality, because we say that inequality is not only a monetary issue and a normative issue, that we of course want people to have a decent life and benefit from our economic system, which is not always the case. But also because we think that massive inequality in countries leads to an amount of polarization and dysfunctionality that makes it difficult to implement policies that can then fight climate change. The fourth one is fighting poverty. I think this whole climate change debate needs to look at the poorest in the world. Otherwise, we have a system which is partly based on post-colonial structures. We have trade systems that are beneficial for certain people, but exploit other people. And if you don't kind of make sure that the poorest in the poorest countries have a decent minimum living standard first, then tackling climate change in these countries won't be possible either. And the last point is the empowerment turnaround, as we call it, to particularly give education and jobs to women, which is related to a normative factor, because I feel like, in 2022 in Germany, women who have the exact same job still get 8% less money than men, which is just a normative question, just not understandable, but also related to this population issue I mentioned before. The more education and the more social security systems are there, the faster the birth rates decline.
Yeah, that's I think that's very fascinating. So we're already seeing, the declining birth rates. And I just actually had the pleasure of speaking with Mark Jacobson, which is an environmental engineer at the University of Stanford, and he wrote a paper. I think it's I don't remember the name of the paper, John, so maybe help me out here. But he'll find it. Basically, the Green New Deal is they borrowed a lot of the ideas that he wrote, and there are currently, I think, we could get 145 countries on all renewable energy by 2030. And I think there are 15 or 16 that are almost completely green. And I know Denmark comes to mind. So we are definitely trending in the right direction. You have a lot of companies such as Redwood Materials. You have Tesla that is making widestream, and Rivian as well, widestream adoption of electric vehicles more feasible and affordable. So when I look at the climate change, I think that another issue that a lot of people have is it's been so doom and gloom, and it's really hard to convince people to turn around if all they're hearing is we're all gonna die. I mean, we are gonna die anyways, but like the planet's dying and we're screwed. There's a lot of hope out there. There's a lot of really cool things that are coming on, and I was wondering, does the book highlight any of that?
Very much, and good points. So one tagline we have in the book is we call this stubborn optimism, to exactly refer to these good examples that are already out there. Because I agree. I mean, there is an energy transformation happening. I'm sure we are in the end game of fossil fuel industries. It just, it's still around, and the crucial question is if it will happen fast enough, because it is a race with time. Because we know that climate change is not only an issue that develops kind of linearly when you have like more CO2, temperature rises as much as that as well, but there is a challenge of certain kind of tipping points that after crossing certain amounts of CO2, for example, the system tips quicker than we would expect in a linear way. And I think the question there is then, are we fast enough for the energy transformation to take place? We have the positive examples, mostly in countries that have good, conditions in terms of sun or water or all these things. So it's more difficult in other countries than in others. But good examples are out there. But I think sometimes we also need to ask bigger questions. For example, if we speak about electric cars, I think it's a good example. We need these, and we need electric cars. However, we can't just replace all combustion engines with electric cars, right? And I think that's sometimes the issue of like looking at things that are not just kind of within the same system, replacing one thing by the other, but looking at the real transformation. And that is an important point, also referring to your doom argument, which I agree with. I mean, it's, it can lead to resistance or kind of people saying, oh, we don't have a chance anymore anyways, we just die and we don't do anything. So I think it's super important to paint a little bit this positive vision and say like it is possible. And maybe an interesting factor there is even, I think it would even be beneficial for people if climate change wasn't there at all. Like a transformation of cities, for example. How great is it to be in a city where you don't rely only on car traffic, but can walk and take a bike? I mean, that's in itself a fantastic thing, right? Education for women in itself a great thing. Like having less pollution and maybe not gigantic plastic continents in the oceans is itself a positive outcome. And I think all these things to say like it is possible, and the better life is not only necessary because we want to prevent climate change, but actually because we established a system which doesn't deliver an always better life for everyone anymore. Like we had this narrative in the US, it's very much the American dream, and in Germany it's this like, and in many other countries, I want my children to have a better life than I have. We see that this empirically is not in many countries true anymore. We see that from the growth of the economy in the last 20 years, low and medium income families did not really benefit from that, but partly have like 3 jobs and have to pay back debts and have a very stressful life. And I think, bringing this together and say like we want an economy that serves the people, and in addition to that, say, fight climate change, but not say everything is lost anyways, but get behind this and say like we want this transformation for our own sake because we want to be happy people. That should be the challenge.
My apologies, my laptop's going to die. So.
It's okay. Rick, so to go back to Mark Jacobson, the paper that you're referencing is called Low-Cost Solutions to Global Warming, Air Pollution, and Energy Insecurity for 145 Countries. And basically, to summarize it, he, through this study, he's the main author, but there's about 7 or 8 other authors, was that by 2035, using current technology and not anything that has to be developed or things that need to be solved, but literally just the only green technologies that we currently have available, that roughly it would cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $6 trillion a year to convert all of this. But then the cost of that through the savings that would be produced through changing to green technologies would be paid for by itself within like 15 years, I think. And so that like this is kind of talking to the positivity about this is a genuine, like a very solvable problem, but we all actually have to act on it and not just run off of profit motive.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there is a lot of positive. If you look at the decline of costs of solar panels, for example, I mean, it's incredible in the last 10, 15 years even, that it can, in many places already, not globally necessarily, but compete with fossil fuel industry prices. I mean, that's fantastic. And there are positive visions of that. I don't know the specific paper, but we also have an estimation in Earth4All that we think the transformation will cost between 2 to 4% of global GDP annually. If you compare that with what is the NATO agreement on defense, that is 2%, right? I mean, so it is something that is of course a massive transformation, but it's also something that is possible, especially as you mentioned, John, that the costs will equal out at some point, because we already see that I often say that actually the really radical political solution is to continue business as usual, because if we continue this business as usual, then we have the floods in Pakistan that already costs I don't know, hundreds of millions of dollars. Then we have kind of other droughts in many countries and problems with food security and extreme weather events and all these things. So it's always this cost question is of course important, because you need investment, and therefore I also think you need a strong state to get this done, because of course, like the private companies play a crucial role, but very often it is they have to, in the system, base their decisions on profitability. And so I think like support by government is necessary to steer the transformation in the right way. But then I agree, it is not impossible. And that was our whole thing in the book as well, to say like, look, it's ambitious, but we don't come up with a dreamy hippie thing, which is just a better world